kingdoms and empires of old, and the lakes are like oceans in storm or in rest, away, far away to the land of the west, to the west, to the west, where the rivers that flow run thousands of miles, spreading out as they go, where the green waving forests shall echo our call, as wide as all England and free to us all.
Pa! Wait for me, Pa! Oh, Dad, burn, there goes the wagon. Ma, don't go without me. Don't go without me. Woo! I'll tell you what, I'm going west on the Oregon Trail with my Ma and Pa. All 2,600 miles we are going. I'll probably walk the whole way. Can you imagine that? I remember the day that Mr. Burnett came to our town, and that day that he came to our town, I'll tell you what, he got on a box, and he stood on it, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you gotta go out west to Oregon. That's where the land is a-flowing of milk and honey." And so my pa said, "Whoopee, Ma, let's go to Oregon, out yon where the Indians be." So that's where I'm going today, and I hope you want to go with us, because when we get to Oregon, I'll tell you what, they say that the pigs are running around the trees, all cooked, fully cooked. Yes, sirree, with knives and forks in them, so you can take a bite off anytime you want to. That's what they say, so come on, let's go. Woo! Come on, Pop, Ma, wait for me. Woo! Well, I'll tell you what. Westward ho! And when I go to high schools and they say some other word there, please know that's not what it's about. It's the westward movement, going west. That caught up, didn't you? I was so surprised the first time that a few students said something different. All right, you kids. I tell you what, you better get down here. I've got the coffee on, the beans are cooking, and my pie is looking so good today. I thought I was pretty versatile. I took my dough and I rolled it out on the wagon seat. Got some berries yesterday, and I'll tell you what, I cooked a pie. So afterwards, you can all join us for coffee and pie. It's going to be real good. But I'll tell you what, it is back-breaking work. Working over a little fire every night. Sometimes it rains, and there I've got a little green fire going with smoke in my face. It's enough to just wear you out. That's all I can say. Back-breaking work. And I've got no tables. I've got no chairs. I tell you what, it's something awful. And then when you have these dad-burn kids who don't come when they're called. By the way, my name is Lodiza Frizzell, don't forget it. I finally made it over to California, but it was not an easy trip. I'll tell you, my kids running in every which direction. Sometimes, you know, they say, keep an eye on your kids, the Indians might capture them. Well, I was hoping they would. I've got 7 kids. I don't care if I lose 1 or 2, I can always make more. Well, I'll tell you what, one night, I wanted to have bread for my family, so I hooked up a umbrella over my head, and I stood there in the rain, and for 2 hours I made sure my bread got cooked so we'd have it the next day to eat. So that's what it's like going on that westward movement. Ladies, you're gonna love it if you ever try it out. But I guarantee you better go in an RV and not in a wagon like I did. I'll see you later. My name being Lodiza Frizzell. Well, these women that went across the trains and the plains, they started all the way. Some of them from the East Coast, some of them from Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, but they all started at the jumping off places there, the Independence area and Council Bluff. All those stopping off places were where most of them caught their wagon trains. And so all I've got to say is, oh, ye pioneers, ye Madonnas of the plains, how courageous you were to take either the California, the Santa Fe, the most romantic trail, the Oregon Trail, or the Mormon Trail going west to make yourself a better life. But your husband probably went for the adventure of it all. Am I right, men? You would have gone west to shoot a buffalo, to prove yourself up, or to get more land. But the women had to go because, ladies, what was it back then? A patriarchal society. No, whoopee! There was no such thing as women's lib in those days. So if your father, your husband, or your brother said, we're going west, you got in that wagon and you headed west, even if you were pregnant. And 1 out of 5 women were all pregnant on the trail. Isn't that fun? Woo! And I'll tell you what, their main thing was keeping the family together. So the two of them would sit on the side of their wagon, the man and the woman, but they had different goals and different ideas about what it was going to be when they finally got to their destination. If they got to their destination, that was the whole thing in a nutshell. Well, one of the ladies who was very, very, very good at keeping track of everything in her diary, and by the way, there was about 800 women's diaries out there that they have found, and the Covered Wagon diaries are some of the best excerpts of them, if you ladies want to read them. But this little lady here, Charlotte Stearns Pembroke, looks pretty stern, doesn't she? I'll kind of walk around with this little picture. But here is what she had to say, April 29th, 1853. I hung out what things were waiting in the wagon, made griddle cakes, stewed berries, and made tea for supper. After that was over, I made 2 loaves of bread, and then I mended a pair of pants for William, pretty darn tired. This morning I stewed apples. This afternoon I commenced to doing washing when the wagon stopped. And I'll tell you what, I'm very tired tonight and I'm very lonely. Well, the next day she said, well, doggone, I gathered up all my dishes and they were dirty. I didn't even have time to wash them last night. I am derelict in my duties since I started this trip. And this morning, however, I made a pair of calico pants for my husband, and they look pretty darn good, I think. Yes, they do. But let me tell you, ladies, made a pair of calico cases for pillows. Now, you do calico or dark colors because white is not appropriate for the trail. So that's what I've got to tell you. So anyone that's coming on this journey, you better not be lazy, because the journey's not going to do you real well. Thank you very much. Well, that was Charlotte Stearns Pembroke, and she looked stern because she kept track of everything day in and day out in these journals. And the reason I think that they did that is because not knowing what's up ahead, if you're writing everything down, I stewed potatoes, I made the bread, I did this, I did that, I picked up buffalo dung, if you will, dry for my campfire, I hauled water. If you keep those things up, then of course you are not going to have to think about what's really going to come around the corner. Are there Indians up ahead, disease up ahead, a storm up ahead, or an accident? You don't think about those things when you're doing the daily work up every day, and that is what this history is made of. So the chief figure of the American West, the figure of the ages, is not the long-haired, fringed-legging man riding a raw-boned pony, but the gaunt and sad-faced woman sitting on the front seat of her wagon, following wherever her Lord may lead. That was the seed of America's wealth. That was the great romance. That is for sure. Well, you can imagine starting out on the trails west. Most of them met in those jumping off places. They started there. The California, the Mormon, and the Oregon trails all started there. And Independence was a pretty darn good place. Excuse me. A pretty darn good place to start out on the trail. Here it is. Let's see, where are we? Right over here. And they started out, And the Santa Fe Trail is the only one that kind of veered off into a different trail than the others. The others kind of follow themselves together. And for the longest trail was the Oregon Trail, that's for sure. And they started out probably hauling their wagons on a steamboat, getting to Independence or Council Bluffs or wherever. They would put their wagons on a beautiful steamboat that would take them from St. Louis up the Missouri River. And then when they got to the jumping off places, they took that wagon out and then they bought their last supplies in those jumping off places. And they'd load up that wagon, and the wagon was not a Conestoga wagon like you see in the movies. No, indeed, they were beautiful spring wagons, about 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, with sides 2 feet high. And then there were, the top of the wagon was linseed oil on canvas, 2 double layers. And you would have about 1,000 pounds of food per person, if you can imagine, 1,000 pounds. So if you figured that out, how much would that be if you went to your grocery store? That would be 200 pounds of flour, 200 pounds of flour. You would have also 20 pounds of sugar for each person. And can you imagine doing all this shopping before you left? Now, you might stop at a fort or some place like that along the way. Oh, bacon, unless you were Jewish. You would take 150 pounds of bacon, and if it was, sometimes when they couldn't cook out on that cook stove early in the morning, at least you could have coffee, and you could have bacon, and you could have hardtack, which were little, kind of like little hard biscuits or a hard square biscuit, kind of like soda crackers, but very hard. And then 10 pounds of coffee. If you couldn't drink the water, but you could get coffee into it, it would taste a lot better. And this is what also, if you boiled your water, you might not get cholera, but most of them didn't know it at that point in the journey. And then 10 pounds of salt per person. So figure that out. If you have 4 people, 2 children and 2 adults on your wagon train, that's a lot of poundage of food. And that's why when they would get into the middle of their journey, a lot of them would dump out all the furniture that they had and anything to make the wagons lighter, but they never threw out the food unless they had to. First thing to go, the bacon. Well, the women that said goodbye to their mothers and their original families that they grew up in back east, or in the early part of, maybe in Illinois or Indiana, it was always sad to say goodbye. And so you can imagine this might be the last time, the very, very last time you would see your own mother. And unless you wrote her a letter on the trail, or wrote her a letter back when you arrived to your destination, you may never see her again. God be with you till we meet again. Oh, I know he'll be your friend. Darling daughter, I'm with you till the end. God be with you till we meet again. Till we meet, till we meet, till we meet at Jesus' feet. Till we meet, till we meet. God be with you, daughter, till we meet again. And you would sure be looking out the back of that wagon, waving goodbye to your loved ones, promising to write somewhere along the trail. Well, when you started out there from Independence or Westport, and you think of the music around the campfire, the first 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, the first week or 2 of that wagon train journey, you can be sure that there's going to be a lot of high spirits and a lot of revelry. And people would usually gather around the campfire in those early days, and they would sing songs. If you'll allow me to do at least one. I know our time is limited today, but This one is so pretty, and I think you will really enjoy it. It is called, of course, Shenandoah. Oh, Shenandoahs, I long to hear you. Your rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. Oh, Shenandoah, I love your daughter. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I love your daughter. Away, I'm gone away, across the wide Missouri. Shenandoah, I'll not deceive you. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to deceive you. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. Well, Rebecca Nutting Woodson said about the early part of the journey, she said, the California gold fever was getting pretty high by that time. Mr. Hickman and my father made their minds to fit out and start as soon as it was safe in the spring of 1850. You had to make sure there was grass for all of your oxen or cattle or mules to eat. And most of those wagons from that spring wagon I showed you, they were pulled by oxen, 4 to 6 per wagon. That would be your biggest expense, about $400. The older ones expected to amass very great fortunes when they got out west. The rest of us have so many young ones, so all we wanted to do was just have fun and take pleasure in things. Our spirits were high, especially since there was a prairie wedding going on. On May 21st, David Parker and Catherine Hickman was married. Father went to Haynesville, got a preacher, and such a shivaree. That night, I'll tell you what, it could have awoken the 7 deadly sleepers. The newly married couple occupied a wagon for sleeping apartments, but the first notice that they had of any disturbance was when most of the men of the company got at the front of the wagon and the women got at the back of the wagon, and woo, they shoved them right out on the plains, shot off guns, banged on pots and pans, and yelled and hollered and hooped, at least until midnight. And then the next morning, when they came in, they walked a little bit sheepishly as they came into camp. But that was their first night. They had had a shivaree like no other shivaree on the plains. So there were wonderful times on the plains, believe me. There was a wonderful story about Catherine Sager. I tell you what, I actually have a picture of her when she was grown up, plus one of her little sisters and the baby sister. And I'm just going to walk around with them, and I'll let her tell you her story. Well, I'll tell you, it was not easy for us going west. Mama was pregnant, and right off the bat, the wagon turned over with her in it. And what little baby she had, oh, the little baby she had soon after that, it was a very hard childbirth for her. But she had Henrietta, and this is Henrietta right here. This is our other little sister, Matilda, and this here be me. Oh, I'm upside down. Catherine, that's me. And we all were in high spirits, but boy, Mama wasn't feeling good after having the baby. It was a hard birth for her. And then I did the silliest thing that any young child could do, but we all did it. I jumped off the wagon seat one day, and my dress, the hem of my dress got caught in the wagon wheel, and I went under the wagon, and the wheel rolled right over me. And Paul, he lifted me up, and my leg is a-dangling, and he said, oh, look at her. This poor girl's going to be crippled for life. She is. She sure is. Oh, dear, what can we do for her? Well, it would be $5 that we had to pay to have a doctor set my leg. $5 for an amputation or for her setting the leg, whichever you wanted. Yeah. Well, there we go. So we went along, and everything was going all right until we got to Fort Laramie. Fort Laramie, you can get a lot of goods and such, but what happened there was very, very tragic. Father tried to herd off a whole herd of buffalo. And when a buffalo is stampeding, you want to get out of the way. But there's Papa. He's waving his arms and his hands, and lo and behold, he got completely run over is what happened. And he was such bad shape after that they put us both under the wagon when we would noon it every day, when we would take a break for lunch. And Paul was in very bad shape. He knew he was passing away. So he called Mr. Shaw, our wagon master, and he said, oh, Mr. Shaw, I'm begging you. Can you take my wife and my 7 children all the way to Oregon? Because I'm not going to make it much longer. And Mr. Shaw said, don't worry about it. We'll get you there. We'll get him there. Don't worry. Everything's going to be all right. Well, it wasn't all right for Pa, of course. He died there, and we found a hollowed out log and put his body in it, and then we covered it up and rolled the wagons over it so the Indians couldn't undo him, bring him up out of the ground again and steal his clothing or anything. And I tell you, we wept and we mourned, but Mama, the worst of all, she took it very, very hard. And soon after that, she got what was known as mountain fever. Well, normally you get mountain fever, you have a few bad days, but you get over it. But Mama was in a very weakened condition, and she passed away too on the wagon train. So within 21 days, all of us children were without a mother, without a father, and there was nothing that we could do except me, being the 14-year-old that I was. I took the little baby and I wrapped her up and I put her in my arm as I would drive the team of oxen every day. And I took care of the little one, that's for sure. And all the other little children, barefoot that they were, I did the best I could. But Mr. Shaw said, now, you hold on. You just hold on. We're going to get to the Whitman Mission, which is a Presbyterian mission. Mrs. Whitman was one of the first women out west. And she and her husband were missionaries, Methodists they were, I remember that. And he said, just wait until we get there. Well, we finally arrived at the Whitman Mission. I got off the wagon and I was holding the little baby. And Mrs. Whitman came up to us, and I swear to you, she was the prettiest woman I ever saw in her sunbonnet. Oh, she was so pretty. And she had her arms out like this, and she took the little baby from me. She said that was the greatest treasure of all, because she had lost her little girl two years before by drowning. So she took the little baby, and then she put each of us children under her arm. And she said, you're going to be my children now, and my husband, Marcus, is going to be your daddy. And we had what we thought was the best thing that could ever happen to us. And for 3 years, we were so happy living there at the mission and helping them. Oh, we really loved helping our new mom and papa. And we took them not for granted, not at all, we didn't. But one day a wagon train came through the missionary encampment, and they had the measles. And the Cayuse Indians got the measles. We got them too. But we recovered because we had immunity, don't you know? And the Indians got so furious, they said, you brought the white disease on us, now all our people are dying. And so they came in one day, and unbeknownst to us, they killed 12 of us there at the mission, including our new mama and papa, the Whitmans, my 2 baby brothers, and all that was left were we girls. Well, I would tell my grandchildren and my children years later, we hid under the bed when the Indians were massacring but they left us alone for some reason. So I took my little sisters, and we all got to California. And my grandchildren, I said, don't complain about nothing. You never know, you might lose your parents, not just once, but twice. You might lose part of your family one day. So appreciate every day that you got, and thank the Lord that you still got life in your breath and your body and your bones, because you don't know what God's journey is going to be. That's my story, and it's a true story. Well, most of the Indians, however, were purveyors of goods, and they would help out these families. Especially the women would say, "Oh my gosh, my husband couldn't shoot anything if he tried. First time he's ever had a gun to shoot a buffalo or an antelope or anything else." So they would buy meat, fresh meat from the Indians, and exchange it for beautifully made shirts or some of their bread or something else. So the Indians were pretty good to most of these women, let me tell you, they really were. But sometimes there were experiences, there's no doubt about it, with the Indians. I'll share a few of them in a minute. I just thought I would share another story of a woman who had a lot different story than dear little Catherine Sager. And of course, that would be our darling Susan Shelby McGoffin. I was the first Anglo woman into Santa Fe, and I had the most wonderful journey with my husband, whom I called me Alma. And we started out in the year of the Great Mexican-American War, 1846, 47, 48. It was a momentous journey, and I wrote about the whole event, everything from A to Z I wrote about. And my wagon was a baggage wagon. I didn't sit on the front stoop like all the other women or walk beside it. I had a carriage, a rockaway carriage with little eyes and glass windows. But my baggage wagon had a beautiful 4-poster bed in it, which was brought out every night when they would put this beautiful conical tent out there. And under the conical tent, my 4-poster bed with a little rug under it. And then to the side, please note this, I brought the first bathtub out west. And you can thank me for that. They needed hygiene here more than they needed anything else. I found that out. And along the sides of my wagon, I had little chicken coops, so we could have eggs every day. And I even made an egg supper for my husband from those eggs one night. That was the first time I cooked for him. We had sage tea, and I made biscuits, and it was just delicious, he said. That was the last meal I made on the trip as well. I brought my maid with me. And she did all the cooking hereafter. But I'll tell you what, we did have some skirmishes or some problems along the way. It wasn't all just selling trade goods from Santa Fe on down to Chihuahua. There were other adventures along the way. But trust me, I did have some heartache. I lost a little child at Ben's Fort. And again, I lost another little baby down at Matamoros, Mexico, when we was heading home. But all the Army boys that I met that came in with us with the great Army of the West in 46, and General Kearney, Stephen Watts Kearney, became one of my dearest friends. We went to church here, right here, at your parochial church. Your cathedral wasn't built. Now, I wasn't Catholic. He was Episcopalian, but we weathered very well. We did. We did quite well on that. So I tell you, that was one of the most wonderful adventures of all. And I always said I wanted to come back one day to beautiful New Mexico and see what has happened since I've been here last. And now, lo and behold, you are a state. I'll just do a quick little song. I think my time is kind of running along, isn't it? The trains didn't run this fast, I can guarantee you. Well, the harvest moon is shining on a field of human hay, and the battle roll is whining in a very plaintive way. Now it's full on the prairies, I recall times that were merry. We always lose love around, always love around. Take-a-wee-coo, 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 pobrecito tacolote, su cansa de volar. Teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco. Pobrecito tacolote, ya su cansa de volar. Oh, the harvest moon is shining in a very plaintive way. Tegolote de guadagna, para madrugador. Que tuviera tus alitas, que tuviera tus alitas, que tuviera tus alitas, para mi amor. Teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco. Pobrecito tacolote, yo su cansa de volar. Teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco, teco-eco, eco, eco. Pobrecito tacolote, yo su cansa de volar. I soon shall be in Frisco, and then I'll look around. And when I find the gold lumps there, I'll pick them off the ground. I'll scrape the mountains clean, my boys. I'll drain the rivers dry. A pocket full of rocks bring home, oh brothers, don't you cry. Oh, California, that's the land for me. I'm going to San Francisco with my wash bowl on my knee. Well, I don't know how many actually of you would have gone on the trails, but the Californians, of course, in 49 went for gold. And with the gold, of course, went cholera. There's no doubt about it. The two went hand in hand. And then, of course, as I said, the Indian situation, well, yes, they did exist. There's no doubt about it. There was a Susan Parrish and an Olive Oatman that came down the Santa Fe Trail. And one of them was absolutely, they were very good friends. Susan and Olive were very good friends. And the two families started out from Iowa, and when they got to New Mexico, they said, let's do that newly paved road through the Socorro Mountains. Well, of course it wasn't paved. Nothing was paved here until 1937. I think that was Highway 66. So they were going through territory they'd never been before. No one else had either, except a couple other families. And the Oatman family said, we're going to go on ahead because mom is expecting a baby, and we want to get to Fort Yuma in time. And the Parrish family, oh, they took their time. Mrs. Parrish was expecting to, but they said, oh, we'll just take our time. There's no problem here. And so that's exactly what they did. And when they got into the Socorro Mountains, and just beyond, they found that the Oatman family had been attacked by 17 Indian braves. They were Apache. 3 of the children were killed, the mother and the father and the newborn baby. The baby was just born when they were attacked, and they didn't realize that they were being observed in the distance by these braves. But little Mary Ann and little Olive Oatman were left alone, and they were taken into the Apache tribe, if you will, and Olive was sold later on in life to the Mojaves. Well, poor little Susan found out about all of this years later when some soldiers came knocking at their door in the San Bernardino region where they had a store, and they said, we have a young woman here who was captured by the Indians. She says she knows you folks. Can you take her in? We've recaptured her from the Mojaves. And we took in our old friend, Olive Oatman. She had tattoos on her chin, tattoos on her arms, and for the next 4 years, I said to myself, I don't think there's anything like civilization that's worth what this young woman is going through, because she wants to go back to her Indian brave husband and her 4 little children. But here she was, almost captured again, if you will, by all of us white people, telling her, you need to be with your own kind. That's what you need to be. And for 4 years, she mourned for her children. We never had the same kind of friendship as we had when we were little girls. And then we found out she had some relatives up in Oregon. And we sent her up to Oregon, where they say after several years, She did get finally the tattoo markings out of her chin and some off of her arms, but I don't know if she ever got them off of her heart. But Mr. Fairchild from Texas met her up there in Oregon, and he took her back to Texas as his new bride, and her story fades from history. Isn't that a beautiful story? Another young girl that was captured by the Indians was a young lady called Mary. And Mary's mother, Indian mother, I have captured you from those bad Indians. He is going to kill you. And she did. She traded her horse for this young girl. She gave a horse for this little girl and says, do not touch her. Do not harm her. I take tomahawk to you. And she did. She protected her. And one day when some of the Indian men in the tribe wanted to, and these were Sioux Indians, wanted to take this little girl and violate her, she was buried under the ground of the teepee, and buffalo hides were put over the top of her. And Snana, the Indian mother, protected this young child even in that situation. She was a very brave young girl, and eventually she was captured, recaptured, if you will, by the soldiers, and was taken out to California. But later, these two women, Snana, who's dressed here in American dress, if you'll notice, and Mary, wrote many, many letters to each other. Now that's unusual because there are no diaries and no letters from Indian women, Hispanic women, or black women, unfortunately. We only have their stories, but we don't have any diaries from them. But Snana could write a little bit, and she would write in her letters to Mary, she would say, my dear daughter, to the day she died in 1908, my dear daughter. So there were beautiful relationships among the Native people as well as the Hispanic people and these young women. Some of them did not want to go back to their Anglo ways after they were once captured. And of course, you know, that's why Abiquiu and Balloon are situated where they are. That's where a lot of the young women who had little half-breed children would take their little children and live out their lives. And those were outpost cities at that time in our history in the 1800s. Well, I tell you what, it's 1:15, but I'm going to keep going if I may. Just a little bit. Seems like we got a late start, and I'm very sorry about that.
Adrietta Hickson's my name, and my mother makes me wear this dad-burned sunbonnet day in and day out. She says, and I don't mean to be, as in your culture, politically incorrect, or hint or make anyone feel badly, but I said, I do not want to look like a squaw, Mama. I don't want my skin dark. So I had to wear this stupid thing day in and day out, and Mother made me wear little gloves on my hands too. And when I rode a horse, I had to ride side saddle. I don't like riding side saddle. It's easier to ride astride, but I wasn't able to do that. My father would have whipped me for sure if I had done that. And one day I was playing chess with Mrs. Smith, and this nosy old woman comes up to us on the train, and she says, that's just one step next to gambling, playing chess. That's what she said. Oh, yes.
But the other little girl, her name was Molly Sanford. Molly Sanford took a different viewpoint. Well, I'm not going to wear that dad-burned sunbonnet. I went into the wagon, and I hauled out some of Pa's clothes. I put on some pants and some of his boots, and I said, this is the way I'm going to dress. I couldn't sit down for a week after that, after Mom and Pa got a hold of me. They said, you're going to wear a dress whether you like it or not. But I wanted to wear pants just like Pa. I thought that makes more sense. And that's what the wealthy women would do. They would wear something called bloomers. Well, I don't have real bloomers on, but you get the idea. You get the idea. They would have bloomers on, and those wealthy women found that to be a statement, a fashion statement that they could take with them on the trail. Oh, don't you remember sweet Betsy from Pike, who crossed the high mountains with her lover Ike, with one yoke of oxen and one spotted hog, a tall Shanghai rooster and a big yellow dog. They soon reached the desert where that Betsy gave up, and down in the sand she lay rolling about. Then Ike in great wonder looked on in surprise, saying, "Betsy, get up, you'll get sand in your eyes." They stopped at Salt Lake to inquire on the way, and Brigham he swore that sweet Betsy should stay. Sweet Betsy got scared and she ran like a deer, while Brigham stood pawing the ground like a steer. The Indians came down in a wild yelling horde, and Betsy was scared they would scalp her adored. So behind the front wagon wheel Betsy did crawl, and there she fought Injuns with musket and ball. The horses ran off, and the cattle all died, and the last piece of bacon that morning was fried. Sweet Betsy grew weary, laid down to repose, while Isaac stood gazing at his Pike County rose. They climbed to the top of a very high hill. They stood looking down upon old Placerville. Ike shouted and said, as he cast his eyes down, "Sweet Betsy, my darling, we've got to hang town." Well, that just gives you a little idea of some of the women and their experiences. And there was one woman who said to her husband, as she was going to Pikes Peak for gold and silver, he bought a liniment that was supposed to be put all over your body, and he was told if you roll down the hill, you'll pick up the gold if you have a surplus. Or if you put on the other kind of liniment, you'll roll down the hill and get silver. He thought it was just going to be a great, easy adventure. And of course, his little wife, she could make a fancy cake, but she didn't know how to cook bread. She didn't know how to cook at all. And she was a Southern girl, and she was pregnant on the trail, and she had terrible dysentery, sick to her stomach. Oh my goodness. She just said to her husband, "I just want to lie down. I want to lie down right here in the sand. I just want to die. And I want you to go on without me. I'm not worth taking with you. That's what I feel like." But an old miner said, "Give this woman some castor oil." So she went into the cupboard and she found some linseed oil, and she drank the whole thing. And then she found some hair tonic. She took that as well. And the next morning, I felt wonderful the next morning. And they took off, and they ended up in California, and the little baby was born. And then later in the diary, she said, "I think the most handsome thing I've ever seen in my life was a Sioux Indian man riding this beautiful pony. He was naked from here up, and you know what I mean, girls? Gorgeous man. And then he had a discarded hoop skirt around his waist. Best looking man I saw in the whole train." Well, there you go. So there were remedies that they would find, but very few medicines were taken with them, and very few doctors, and most of them were quacks that were along the way. You have in your hand just a little bit of music, and we just have to sing something before we leave here. I tell you what, I have so many more stories. I have a beautiful black woman to share her story with you, and many others, but let's just do this one together. Home on the Range, the Camptown Races, and Buffalo Gals, and it's a pretty fast pace. So get ready to fly, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to go faster on this song than anything else. So for those of you who came via Cornelius, thank you for coming. God bless you. Okay. Oh, give me your home where the buffalo roar, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Oh, home on the range. Thank you. Where the deer and the antelope play. Beautiful. Where seldom are sounding great. Here it comes. The Camptown lady sing this song, doo-dah, doo-dah. The Camptown race track 5 miles long, oh doo-dah day. I come down with my happy, doo-dah, doo-dah. I go back home with a wonderful day, oh doo-dah day. Gonna run all night, gonna run all day. I'll bet my money on a motel night, somebody bet on the day. Buffalo gals, here you go. As I was walking down the street, down the street, down the street, a pretty girl I chanced to meet. She was fair to see. Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight, come out tonight. Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight and dance by the light of the moon? I asked her if she'd have a dance, have a dance, have a dance. I thought that I might get a chance to shake a foot with her. Oh, Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight, come out tonight. Oh, Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight and dance? Buffalo gals, won't you come out tonight and dance by the light of the moon? Well, that was pretty good. I think there's some applause. Oh my goodness. Well, we got such a late start today. I feel like I'm just trying to catch up, just like the wagons. How much more time can we afford to spend?
Carry on.
Carry on, carry on. Caroline Richardson.
I just love, absolutely love to do the washing in the moonlight. I wait till it's moonlight time. I think it's so beautiful out there. That's what I love to do. And I starch my white aprons because I don't want to end up looking like a man before this trip is over. You know, we women do not want to be men. Maybe you haven't figured that out, men, but we're tired of all the hard work on the train. We really are. So that's why me being alone with my wash in the moonlight is so special for me. And this starched apron just means so much to me. And then another one, and then the opposite expression in another diary was America E. Rollins. Well, dadgummit, I'm tired of doing the wash. I'm tired of hauling the water. You try taking my soap and washing everybody's clothing. I got 10 people to do the laundry with. No time to do it. That other woman, she was a little in the head. That's all I gotta tell you. It's a lot of work keeping track of your whole family and making sure they're wearing even clothing. But I'll tell you what, I told them, wear the same thing you're wearing the day we start. Don't change outfits till we get to our destination. I don't care how many months it takes. I'm not washing your clothes. And that was her attitude. So you can imagine how wonderful they smelled by the time they got back there. Yes. Anna Maria Morrison. Now, she's kind of a neat lady. She kind of took the same trail that Susan McGoffin took, except she took that fabulous cutoff, which is on here. Trust me, it is on here, on this map with all the trails west. I got this at Ben's Fort. It's a wonderful map of all the western trails and all the little side, you know, and anyway, Anna Maria Morrison, she came out a little different style than the other ladies. She didn't wear an apron, except a lot of married women did wear an apron as part of their decor, and most of them had hoop skirts on, which I would have worn today, but I thought we were going to be in that smaller room, and I knew I couldn't get through the chairs with a hoop skirt on, so I didn't wear it. But she definitely came out with her husband. He became eventually a lieutenant, colonel, yes he did, and he was head of the fort here at Fort Marcy from 1850 to 1853. And so Anna Maria Morrison and her husband, Governor Morrison, across the plains as a commanding officer's wife, and she came in an ambulance. And when you come in an ambulance, it's like an RV, ladies. It's really pretty nice. They were the nicest wagons to travel in because you had beds, tables that opened up during the daytime. You had compartments for your food. You had compartments for your medicine. Everything was in there that you could possibly ever want. And they were very comfortable. You could stand up in them just like an RV, really and truly. And some of them even had little bathrooms. So
there she is coming across the trail. She goes to Cimarron Cutoff, which was the worst cutoff if you wanted to run into Indian attack like the White Party did. That would not be very good for you to do, but if you're with an army troops marching beside you as you're going out west, you probably would be a lot safer. Anna Maria only lived a few years after her experience here, maybe about 16 years afterwards. But just like Susan McGoffin, you know, traveling out west was very hard on some of these women. They did not live long, long lives. They really didn't. And she says, when I got to Las Vegas, she said they're building an adobe church there, and every day you have to turn out on a Saturday to build it, or you are fined for $2. She said, we lost things in Las Vegas. We were robbed from bandits there along the way, just, you know, petty crime, and it was just terrible. But it was a very healthy climate there, and they say it was can be very cold even in the summer. But she said, now I do know how to fix a Mexican house. A wealth of paper, a canvas is indispensable around the wall, and the little fireplaces in the corner, I particularly admire those. And then the bancos, or the rolled up bedding on the side of the room. And that was because the Moors, which influenced the Hispanics, of course, lived on the floor, and they slept on the floor, and they ate on the floor. So when you would come to New Mexico in the mid-1800s, the houses you would go into had very few tables or chairs or anything else until the Americanos started coming in with the Santa Fe Trail and started bringing other goods such as furniture. But most of the houses were very, very simple. But she said the most amazing thing is all the Hispanic women put up all these pictures of saints real high on the wall, and crosses and little paper rosettes, and that's how they would decorate. And they even had some mirrors up on the wall. And she said one house she went into had 19 little looking glass mirrors in it. Someone must have gotten a good deal on the trail, I guess. That's a lot of mirrors for one room. But she said Las Vegas was a very lonesome looking place, very few attractions, not a shrub or a flower, nothing but black mud walls. But they do have a hotel called the American. Whether that is the hotel, the main hotel there today or not, I doubt it. But that was the hotel there in those days. And she said going through Tecolote from Las Vegas, on her way to Santa Fe, reminded her of Harper's Ferry. Oh, she says, it's wonderful air, and now it's cooler, but then being on the plains, and we can sit under a pine tree when we noon it at noon every day, and it's just so refreshing to be here. And when they got to Pecos, Indian ruins, just like Susan McGoffin and every other trail traveler, they would go into the church, walk down the aisle, and look at the little Santo niches. There were no Santos there. I think there was a cross there for a long time. And the roof was still on the building. Yes, the painted vigas were all there. So that was her experience, just like Susan McGoffin's. And Susan said, I just don't think I should walk on the floor. I'm walking on little pottery shards, and I just feel I'm being sacrilegious doing that. So they had that experience of seeing that pueblo that was about 3,000 people at one time. I think 1837 is when they all left that area and headed over to Jemez Pueblo, the last 17 survivors. Then they got to San Miguel and San Jose. She went into a house there, and she walked under a very low door, and there was a woman sitting there with her daughter, and she said, oh, that is the most indolent looking woman I've ever seen in my life, and she's rolling cigarettes. And she offered me one, but of course I declined. I would not smoke, but I went to my wagon, and I got a cup of sugar for her and gave it to her and her daughter. And so wherever these women, these American women from back east came, they tried to get along with everyone out west. They really did try. And if they didn't learn Spanish, most of them did, you know, that came out here, they would try to share customs with one another, such as how to make an apron. Oh, how did you make that? Would you show me how you made your sunbonnet? You know, they would show them how to make a sunbonnet. Or like Susan McGoffin, who said, I cannot wait till you show me how to make tortillas. And after a day of making tortillas, she said, just go to the store and buy them. It's too much work. But finally they did get to Santa Fe. I'm not at all disappointed in the appearance of Santa Fe. It is the most miserable, squalid-looking place I have ever beheld, except the plaza. There is nothing decent about it. Sorry, people. Though all I have seen as yet was in riding through the town to reach our habitation, which is located in the suburbs. The houses are mud, the fences are mud, the churches and courts are mud. In fact, it is all mud. That is what she wrote. But she was very glad when after 3 years she could go back home to New York and she had her first child. And 6 years later, this beautiful woman, Anna Maria Morris, writing about Santa Fe, and she did grow to like Santa Fe fairly well, and she did enjoy the Army men and the local women, but she did pass away after 6 years, arriving back in her town, back in New York. There were wealthy women that went on the trails. Now, I'm going to tell you, these wealthy women were something else again. There were two, especially that I got a kick out of, Harriet Clark and Harriet Ward. And they were traveling in the same party. And these women, oh my goodness, they went in style. They had these beautiful carriages. They had 30 workmen keeping track of all of the cattle. There was about 500 cattle that went with them. There were about a herd of horses, about 40 horses that went with them. And they had beautiful tents taken out for them every night that they would languish in. And they had maids and servants and everything. And then when they would see the women and children walking on the wagon trains that they would pass, they would write down, oh, I just saw a boy riding a cow to California. Oh, I saw a mother with 3 children hanging on her, walking barefoot. You know, they didn't help them, which I thought was so strange. They didn't offer any help to these poor women who were trying to make it, but who had maybe lost their oxen or had lost their husbands on the way, you know, to disease or accident. Most accidents and diseases did kill the people on the trail rather than the Indians, remember that. And about 1 out of every, well, let's see, about 1 out of every 10 would expire to disease or an accident, so that was pretty high. But these 2 women, one of them especially, Mrs. Ward, well, my daughter sang last night. She sounds so beautiful. Everybody just admired her. She could play the guitar and sing at the same time. And my husband, he brought me this big, big, beautiful bouquet of desert flora. And I tell you, I loved it. I smelled it. It reminded me of the jasmine back home, and I put it in the jar and put it beside my bed, my 4-poster bed. And I just said, oh, what a beautiful trip and what a beautiful time. And when we got to Independence Rock, I saw Independence Rock, and I saw all the names on it, and it was the 4th of July. And I got so moved, I just couldn't stop crying. It was so beautiful, and I wrote about it. It was such an experience being there on 4th of July. So they were very spoiled. They came in high style, and they had everything they needed. But you know, there was another party that did the same thing. And you've heard more about them in history than anyone else. And of course, that was the Donner Party. And the Donner Party, Mrs. Donner had a wagon. From my reading, I understand that it was 2 levels. The bottom level where they could cook with their you know, the heavy iron stove, which they were taking out to California, and then all the other things in the wagon that they needed, and then up above they would sleep. And this was so top heavy and moved so slowly, and they dawdled and they wasted their time crossing the plains of the United States. They took so much time, and then they took a cutoff that no one had ever really tried before. And that's when they got caught in snow in the Sierra Nevadas, right out in California there. And that whole wagon train, I mean, it was devastating what happened to them. They had to hole up for winter. And if you go to the campsite where they actually were, you can look up at the trees and you can see where they cut the limbs off the trees. The trees have grown. And you can see way up above where the limbs of the trees were cut so that they could make lean-tos and little huts there in their area, and they burrow themselves down in the snow, and those beautiful blankets that the women used to make, those calico crazy quilt blankets, that would keep them warm, and then they would make little fires, but they ran out of food, and of course you know the rest of the story. I think 37 of them were captured, refound, if you will. 17 of them left them in their little camp place there in California, went on looking for help. Half of those people died, but they did get help for these others, and they couldn't get into those snow-packed mountains until April, and the devastation that they found. There was a little girl that hung on to her doll during the whole experience, and I can't even imagine a child going through what she went through. But she had her little doll with her, and she said, my dolly was what kept me going, but I could not. When they said, we want you to now eat something, you need to eat to stay alive, she said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't eat the people that had died. It was not in me. And here's a little girl here. You really can't see it. You almost want to pass it around. But that was a little doll that she kept with her. And the party was at Donner Lake. So do go there if you're in the California area. It is a really touching, sad story. And it could happen to anyone going on the trails. That's why they said we mustn't stop for the Sabbath. We must keep on going. And the only times that they would stop is if someone died and they buried them. They would take a little bit of time to stop on the trail and to bury that person. And of course, they might be just wrapped up in the sheet like Catherine Sager's mother. That's all they had for that poor woman. But they would dig a grave as deep as they could so that the animals would not dig them up, or the Indians, as I said, take off with some of their clothing. But this young girl, her families, some of the Donner Party, I should say grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, are alive today. They have some of the diaries that the women kept, but most of the diaries stopped when they were in this terrible condition in the snow for about 4 to 5 months. No food, no water. It was devastating. So they really did go through a lot, some of them. And some of it made it to Santa Fe or wherever their destination was, California or Oregon, and they made it in one piece, and they did really, really well. And then those diaries were kept just like the family Bibles, and they were passed on to the great-great-great-grandchildren. And that's why we have the 800 of them today. The Yale Library has Susan McGoffin's diary in it. Joy Poole, are you here? She was going to maybe come today. Joy is a person who's seen the diary, and it's quite large. And she told me about it. And a wonderful place for diaries is the Huntington Library. They have fabulous diaries there. Mr. Huntington really went out of his way to get a lot of, let's see, don't move. I'm going to just do this, don't watch.
Oh, yeah.
And there we go. And good thing I didn't have a hoop skirt, huh? So this is the little girl in the Donner Party. So those diaries are there, and if you put on little white gloves, I'm sure they have diaries here at the museum. Am I correct about that, Tomas?
No.
No diaries here? Oh, I was so hoping people could see some of the diaries here, because I thought there would be some.
We have diaries, just no women diaries.
No women diaries. Okay,
From the
very,
Santa
very
Fe.
fine. Let me tell you, since we're talking about some of these women, yes, he's allowing me to go a few more minutes. You're gonna take a noose and put it around my neck when you want me to stop. Let me just mention there was a beautiful black woman. There was a number of black women that I read about, and we're winding down. If you can hang in there, let me do just a little bit, and we're almost done. I know it's time to go, and you want to go eat. I know. Let me just mention this woman here. This is Clara Brown. Now, you talk about a woman with fortitude. All the black women were amazing. When they were freed, either by Lincoln in 1863, or when they bought their freedom, these women knew that they had more opportunity out west than they would have in the southern United States or even in the northern United States. This woman was born in Georgia, bought her freedom, came west, ended up in Central City, Colorado, and took up washing. She was so diligent that she made enough money to bring out 36 family members that she found outfitted them all, brought them out in wagons, and her family members are living in Denver today because of this diligent woman just doing the washing. Isn't that amazing? Bless her heart, if she could have just written her story, it would have been amazing. So some of them were something, and one lady had a cast iron stove on her head with a blanket on top of it, walking through the Humboldt Sink, which was desert in California, just wanting to get to a place where there was freedom. And last but not least, before I sing one last song for you, what does this look like here? Can you see this? It's a famous picture. Last time I saw it was in National Geographic. A wagon with 3 women, not very happy women, sitting there getting their picture taken, and all the children around them. I didn't mention today any of the Mormons. This is a polygamous Mormon with 3 of his wives and his little children, and none of them are very happy. They're kind of sad. What can I say? They're not a very happy group. And some of those women did keep their diaries. Every time they saw a grave, they'd write it down. August 25th, passed 1 grave, made 12 miles. August 26th, passed 3 graves, 1 dead horse, 18 cattle, made 13 miles. August 27th, passed 5 graves, 1 horse dead, 23 cattle, made 15 miles. They kept pages and pages of things like that in their diaries. And did they, like I said, stop very long to bury their dead? No, they didn't. They did not. I'll end up with a mad woman of the plains. That sounds like a good place to stop. This morning, 1 company moved on except 1 family. The woman got mad and would not budge nor let the children go. He had his cattle hitched on for 3 hours and coaxing her to go, but she would not stir. I told my husband the circumstances, and he and Adam Polk and Mr. Kimball went and took each of them a young one and crammed them in our other wagons. And then this woman, well, she took off. She took the back track and she traveled out of sight. She wasn't going to go west. She was sick of the traveling. She cut across, and then meantime, the husband sent his son back to try to find her at the camp where they thought they had left her. And so the young boy did that, and then suddenly she took a complete wide circle, ended up in the campsite at noon, and she'd definitely gone west instead of east, wrong direction. And the husband said, did you see our son John? Yes, I did. And I picked up a stone and I knocked his brains out. Oh my gosh, her husband went back to ascertain the truth. And while he was gone, she set one of his wagons on fire, which was loaded with store goods. The cover burnt off and some valuable articles. He saw flames and came running and put it out, and then mustered spunk enough to give her a good flogging, and then the son came back soon after that. So if you think you wouldn't get frustrated on the trail, you definitely would get frustrated. But like Marion Russell, there have been many things in my life that I have striven to forget, but not those journeys over the Santa Fe Trail. My life, as I look back, seems to have been lived best in those days on the trail. And so you see, this is just the tip of the iceberg of all those journeys west. I thank you for your patience today. And God bless you. If you have any questions and you want to come down here or ask me, I'd be very happy to try to answer them. Yay!